Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar event titled Looking Ahead, the Politics of Florida in the 2022 Midterm Elections. My name is Paul Ortiz. I serve as the Director of Mobilization at the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, and we are proud to be co-sponsoring this event alongside our incredible partners at the University of Florida Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. The UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative is a multi-issue public policy think tank focused on the nation's diverse and growing Latino communities. We believe fundamentally that there is no American agenda without a Latino agenda, and that every single issue is a Latino issue, be it access to healthcare, the right to a quality education, criminal justice reform, or as we'll be discussing here today, the ability to elect candidates who reflect the interests of the Latino community. Building an inclusive democracy that recognizes the important role that Latinos play in America's prosperity requires national partnerships and key political insights so that we can promote stronger candidates and better informed policy decisions that are ultimately responsive to the needs of Latinos and of communities of color. As the nation's Latino population continues to grow, both in its size and influence, we have seen many deliberate attempts by lawmakers across the country to restrict the right to vote in an effort to undermine Latino political power and the power of voters of color. We at UCLA LPPI look forward to continuing to partner with leading public research universities like the University of Florida in order to ensure that Latinos from Los Angeles to Miami and everywhere in between have meaningful access to the ballot box and can elect their candidates of choice. And with that, I would love to introduce and welcome up my colleague, Adolfo Romero from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Adolfo?
All right, thank you very much, Paul. Pleasure to be here. My name is Adolfo Romero. I'm the Assistant Director for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And today I will be facilitating the webinar, Looking Ahead, the Politics of Florida in the 2022 Midterm Elections. To provide you some information on the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, it was established in 1967. Since then, we have grown our collections to include over 10,000 interviews. Our interviews range from immigration history in America, Haitian history, Cuban history, farm worker experiences in the US, such as the Coalition of Immokalee Farm Workers and the Farm Workers Association of Florida. Another special collection that was started in 2014 by Genesis Lara was the Latinx Diaspora in the Americas collection that includes interviews across our borders. We document interviews with grassroots organizations, lawyers, activists, professors, students, and most importantly, individuals in our community who are constantly learning from. These collections are used for research and educational purposes. So now, before we begin and move forward with the webinar, I would like to break it down to you how things are going to look. First, you will hear an introduction by our panelist and moderator, Dr. Paul Ortiz. Then our moderator will ask each panelist one individual question. He will then open a discussion with all the panelists and proceed with the discussion. When the discussion portion has concluded, the moderator will open the segment for questions and answers. After the Q&A section, our moderator will turn it back to me and I will follow up with closing remarks. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar. There is an icon below in the Zoom chat for you to access at any time. Today, we are honored to have an amazing lineup of panelists that are reshaping the state of Florida through their organizations and campaigns. You will hear the importance of this 2022 midterm election and the impacts it will have on minorities and persons of color. Without further ado, I would like to give a warm welcome to Carlos Barberena, who is running for State Senate.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here. My introduction is real quick. Who am I? I'm just a regular guy with an audacious goal, and that's basically to try to affect as much change as possible for the future. And that future consists of, everyone possible, including my kids.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Carlos. Now we're going to be moving with Sandra Denise.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some. My name is Sandra Dennis. I'm the Executive Director of the Miami Worker Center. We are a member-led organization. We organize tenants, domestic workers, women and families for the respect, resources that they need and deserve. We're headquartered in Liberty City, Miami, our membership is based, our Black folks, Afro-Caribbean folks, Latinx communities, and I'm excited to be here on this panel.
All right, thank you very much. Now introducing Andrea Cristina Mercado.
Hi, everyone. Andrea Cristina Mercado, Executive Director of Florida Rising and Florida Rising Together, an organization working to expand democracy and advance racial equity in the state of Florida.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And now our last panelist, Evelyn Perez Verdia.
Thank you, Adolfo. It's an honor to be here at Policy and Politics Initiatives and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. My name is Evelyn Perez Verdia. I am the Chief Strategic Officer and President for We Are Más. It's a firm focused on countering disinformation, research, accurate messaging to diaspora communities, and engaging their cultures and subcultures by using words that matter to them and making sure that we have messaging that they can accept and make them out to go to vote and get involved in civics here in the United States. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Evelyn. And now, last but not least, moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Paul Ortiz.
Okay, after 2 years, you think I remember, hit the mute button. Thank you so much, Adolfo, and such an honor to be here with such amazing organizers, colleagues, people who are doing the work on issues of voting rights, citizenship, equality in Florida and beyond. My name is Paul Ortiz. I have the great honor of being the director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program and a professor of history at the University of Florida. Adolfo mentioned one of my former students, Genesis Laura, who started our Latino Diaspora in the Americas project as part of UF Oral History. And I'm just so proud of her right now. I have to brag on her because she's on the cusp of finishing her PhD in Latin American Studies at the University of California, Davis. And then I also have to brag on the founding executive director of LPPI, Sonia Diaz, who was one of my former students at UC Santa Cruz. I've known her, and actually her parents were great activists in the United Farm Workers. And so it's just lovely to see this multi-generational or intergenerational, activism and energy that keeps going. When Adolfo asked me to participate in the panel, I was really thrilled. I'm actually finishing right now. I'm teaching the Latino History Survey at the University of Florida, and my students hail from the majority of the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean. They're from all over the place. And we started by focusing on Mexican-American history in the Southwest. We went up to New York. We talked about the Puerto Rican experiences. We're finishing the semester with an amazing book by Junot Diaz called Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. No doubt some of you have read the book. As an author myself, and one of my books is an African American and Latinx history of the United States, I think a lot about the issues that our panelists have come together to think about. So I'm going to ask a series of questions to our individual panelists, as Adolfo mentioned, and then we're going to think about, kind of moving to the next step, which will be questions for the panelists in general. But as you're listening, be thinking of your own questions. And we look forward to a really vibrant session. And so the first question I have is actually for Andrea, and I think we have you now on video. So glad to see you again. The first question is about, and a lot of these questions, you'll notice that there is a big intersecting theme, which is how can we improve turnout? How can we think about getting people active, moving beyond the kind of cynicism and inertia that often plagues the political system today, not just in Florida, but really throughout the country? We're seeing a disturbing decline in registration, not just in Florida, but in different parts of the country. And so the first question, Andrea, is how can we ensure our communities are actually turning out to vote in the 2022 midterm elections?
So nice to be with you again, Dr. Ortiz and everyone on this panel. I think for us, our organization really believes that there is a new majority in Florida that wants everyone to do well, no matter where they're from, no matter who they love, no matter what they look like, or what they believe, and that the numbers are there. But 20 years of right-wing rule in our state and the recent decision to make it the epicenter of Trumpism means that we're dealing with two things. I mean, first, the enormous structural barriers to voting and participating in the process of governance. And second, this, what you're referring to, this like deep, deep cynicism that's causing people to tune out and give up on politics as a whole. In the state of Florida, there's over 3 million people of color and young people that are eligible to vote and not registered, or registered to vote and not voting. And so we're addressing that first problem through some court strategies. We had this recent victory against SB 90, which is the law that DeSantis passed that made it illegal to even hand out water to people waiting in lines in a state like Florida, where people are waiting in long lines in epic heat. I think we believe we address the second by asking people not just let's not focus so much on belief in the candidates, but let's actually build organizations where they can become members who believe in each other and our capacity to deliver collective change. And so I think it's our belief that Florida is not going to be turned around by one candidate. Florida is going to be turned around by civic organizations that are building local campaigns to win justice on every block, and where we make politics real and relevant to people again. And when it becomes about shutting down the incinerator, giving kids asthma, or putting money back into affordable housing, and when we see, when people can see that we reclaim our own dignity and we can win real challenges, win real changes.
Excellent. So you're asking us to think about organizing, the organizational aspects of politics. Thank you. Evelyn, the next question is for you. And let me preface this by saying I'm a really big fan of your work, and just so thrilled to be able to, I think this is the first time we've had the chance to work together in a panel. And one of the things I was thinking about before we started today was political scientists are trying to figure out, why is there so much kind of apathy or tuning out, ironically, in this age of social media, when more people than ever have access to information? But one of the hypotheses going around, and I know you're aware of this, is that it's actually there's so much information, which in some cases is kind of tuning people out, because they feel in many cases that the information they're getting is not quite accurate in many ways. So the question for you, and I apologize for the long windup, just kind of thinking out loud here, is how has misinformation impacted the Latino vote in Florida? What can be done to combat misinformation, and how can the 2022 midterm elections help in this process?
Well, thank you, Dr. Ortiz. I think it's amazing, because I was just thinking about a quote from a colleague of mine recently who said, "A lie goes around the world before the truth gets its boots on." And that's exactly what we're seeing right now in the state of Florida, and not only in the state of Florida, but around the world, in the United States. What we're seeing is mis and disinformation with people who share information and they don't know that it's not correct. And disinformation is when you, in a premeditated manner, share the information to weaken democratic institutions or with other purposes in mind. What we're seeing still as we head into the 22 midterm elections is disinformation. A lot of it is coming not only from domestic actors here in the United States, but it has been determined and verified that the disinformation attacking the United States and its democratic institutions is coming from Latin America. Global Americans just did a recent study last year of 16 months with some universities in Latin America, showing that there is a feedback loop between people creating content to denigrate certain people, certain individuals. What we've seen often in this election is a denigration toward Vice President Kamala Harris, also other leaders that of different races. So I think that, it's not going away. I think the music is being amped up. And I think it's important to say that, more important, that events like this that you all put together is what's going to help us make people more aware that this is happening so that it doesn't happen again. At least there are some eyes on this, not like 2016 or 2018. So hopefully it's getting better, but we still are underfunded, and this is undervalued, under-resourced, and undercovered. So we need to do more about this.
Thank you, Evelyn. One of the case studies in my Latino history course is from the Great Depression, the 1930s, when Latinos were first really coming to their own politically in many parts of the country. And even in the 30s, there was a concerted effort by the fascists in Spain to route misinformation through Latin America into the United States to misinform and to try to propagandize, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban American voters in the 30s. And, they would put out pro-Mussolini propaganda and stuff like that. So it's really interesting how there's this continuation, right? Carlos, this would not be a complete event if we did not have someone actually who's running for political office. So I want to preface my question by thanking you for really, because I know what a job that is, the endless hours, the challenges for your family. So I just want to thank you for putting yourself out there and running for political office. And you have been especially concerned, and I had the chance to look at some of your campaign material before we started today, but you have been educating us about a number of different things. One is the devastating impact of COVID on our communities. And as you know, in Florida, I think the death toll now is 73,000 people. And at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, Adolfo has led a project where we've actually been able to interview farm workers, frontline healthcare workers, many of them Latino workers, and to hear the stress in their voices, the really devastating impact of that, especially on Latino working class people, has just been eye-opening. And so the question that we have for you today is, considering this terrible impact that COVID has had on our communities all across the state, hospitalizations, inadequate medical capacity to address these cases, how have the tactics of candidates running for office in Florida shifted? Because we're kind of running, you're running in this period of the global pandemic.
I think there's been much of a shift if you consider everyone else but DeSantis. I think for the most part, everyone has kind of stayed in their lane. Specifically, I liked what Nikki has done to highlight some of the issues. That's actually who I would support. I don't think the other candidates have done enough. And I think, obviously the most recent federal ruling is indicative of why nobody wants to really, take on that issue. Because it seems like every step forward, that we take to get this under control, we've got the judges that are kind of sort of sidelining us. And, that for me touches on a bigger systemic issue, as a whole that we need to address. So, yeah, other than DeSantis, who has just really, made a mockery of, our state, I think everyone else has kind of stayed in their lane with it.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, you have done really incredible organizing work for many years and bringing different groups of people from different parts of the world together in one space. And the question I have for you is, how are Florida's 2022 candidates and future policies planning on responding to Governor DeSantis's recent actions against immigration, as well as the recent influx of Haitian and other Latin American migrants, and in what kind of a follow to that, in what ways can we implement relevant reform without over polarization, such as that we've saw with the governor's executive order recently?
Thank you so much for the question. I think for us, it is clear that Florida, in particular, the work that we do at the Miami Worker Center, which is Miami-Dade County, Florida, I would say Miami-Dade County, all of South Florida, is majority minority. Majority of our communities are from, have immigrant backgrounds, are from different areas in Latin America, all throughout the Caribbean. In particular, we know that when there's been measures where voters through ballot initiatives have been asked and posed questions, we know that we've been successful. And so for me, I think that a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts are coming up because we haven't seen a real response outside of the organizing, our partners who base, build, and organize with immigrant communities responding to this. Folks like the Florida Immigrant Coalition, folks like Florida Rising, who's on the call with us, who's on this webinar with us, folks like FOM, who's been at the forefront organizing Haitian migrants and continue to be at the detention centers, ensuring that people are aware of what's happening in Florida and Florida's immigrants. And so for us, the work continues, and this is the work that we'll continue to do, raising awareness and also letting folks know that immigrant communities are watching. We're aware of what's happening. We're aware of the votes that are being taken. And, come election time, from the local level to the state level, folks will have to reckon with the decisions that they made at the border while we watch what's happening, what the response has been, how local communities, how local elected officials and state elected officials have responded and not responded. Workers are understanding that if they're at jeopardy, how would this economy work in the state of Florida? And so people are making decisions, people are making political decisions based on the responses. And I'm hopeful that people will continue to see the residents of the state of Florida speak out, not only for themselves, but for their neighbors, for their coworkers, against the legislation that is awful, that puts people in harm's way, that increases incidences of human trafficking, that is a demise to our economy and all the workers that continue to put their lives on the line, who have supported us throughout this entire pandemic. We're watching, right? And there will be a response, and we'll continue to do the work that we need to do to respond to these awful legislation.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And we're going to move to talk kind of more generally with the panelists. And I have a list of questions before me, and I think we'll just kind of go. I'll just throw out a question if it's okay with you. And whoever feels most strongly at that point can kind of step up and answer, and we can kind of move into a dialogue if that sounds good with everyone. Well, one of the perennial themes in U.S. history is, and one of the ways that racism works is on a divide and conquer basis. That is, people in power often will pit one group against another group and say, here's some crumbs. And especially if you're of a group where most of the people in that group are working class people, the crumbs are very, very minimal. But in this case, we've talked a lot in recent years, and especially I think since the Obama campaign raised this issue. But then before that, there was the first Rainbow Coalition, the second Rainbow Coalition, the Third World Solidarity Movement, or even the CIO in the 1930s. So my question is, how can we avoid or get past this divide and conquer idea, and how can we build Black and Brown solidarity within our communities to ensure that we're turning out the vote together? And I know a lot of you are already doing this work, so I'm excited to kind of hear what you've been up to and kind of your thoughts about that question.
Excellent question. I think, we have to be very real about what time it is on the political clock of the world. And the right wing talks very fluently about race and class. And we need to be able to do the same. We need to be able to show that we all do better when we all do better. That Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, white, we all want a roof over our heads, a job that does better than just pay the bills, a good education for our kids. And the problem, I think, hasn't been candidates going too far in the progressive direction here in our state. What we're experiencing is the state legislature preempting everything that our champions try to do at the local level. And then, our electeds nationally not yet delivering on what's been promised, despite the enormous crisis of this pandemic we've all just lived through together. And that's one of the challenges that we experience as a grassroots organizations when you knock on someone's door and they say, no matter who's in office, my life doesn't change. And so I think you need to be able to help tell the story of when we do make gains, how do we make sure people know about it? How do people feel ownership of that victory? How do people see that change is possible? And, in the state where Trayvon Martin was murdered, we can't afford to not talk about how we need more than a police-only approach to keeping our children safe. That, in the Sunshine State where utility companies like FPL only invest in 2% of our energy coming from solar, we can't afford to not talk about a just transition and renewable energy, and that it's not just possible, but 100% necessary. And, I think that's how we start to build a new majority coalition, is when we're real about the differences that our communities experience. We can't just flatten our differences, not just between Black and Latino and white, but actually within. The Black community in Florida is incredibly diverse. The Latino community is very diverse. And so we need to honor and acknowledge our differences and stitch together that new majority coalition that we need. And it takes a lot of work. But I think that there's increasingly, there's more and more people that want to see the new majority coalition thrive and win together.
Yeah, I just want to chime in as well. Thank you so much, Andrea. At the Miami Worker Center, our members are African-American, deep roots from the South, deep African-American roots. Their ancestors are American descendants of slaves, folks who are enslaved. We also have a large Afro-Caribbean membership base, as well as folks who are from Latin America. And so any day at the Miami Worker Center, you can hear 3 languages being spoken. All of our meetings are trilingual. It is complicated. It is hard. And we have hard conversations. I think one of the things that we have to be committed to, I like to say, we got to take it to church, right? And if we are truly believe we are a family, that means families love each other, families disagree, they have hard conversations. And for us, it's as me as a Haitian American family who's from Haiti, who came to the States, what did it look like for Haitians to make strides in terms of in fighting the injustice? Who stood us alongside with us? What did African Americans have to do to allow for that to happen? Because we didn't stand on our own. So thinking about having us really deep in political education, talking about colonization, talking about colorism, talking about race, right? Talking about the differences, but also talking about the similarities, who colonized what country, how that implicates how we show up with one another. All of these things have to be discussed, because if we don't deeply discuss it, if we don't start at colonization, then we miss so many other things. One of the things I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is during the uprisings in 2020, we have some of our members asking, what is this all about? Why are people taking the streets? And I'm like, y'all from Cuba, you know this. Y'all from Honduras, we do this, right? This is not new. Because it's African Americans or it was an African American man doesn't make a difference. This is innate in our culture, that we know that when we experience injustice, that we take the streets when we don't feel like we're heard. We take the streets when we feel like we're being silent. And so making it plain and reminding people that America didn't change that, right? There are injustices being done here. And how do we see each other through a human lens, even if it's not my brother, even if it's not my sister, someone who looks like me, speak the same language, the injustice is still are happening, and we can get behind one another. Yeah, I'll pause there. Lots of thoughts.
Thank you, Sandra. Carlos, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes. I think for me, the biggest indignation of society is that we have used the information age, and we've run it afoul. And the bottom line is, when she mentioned colonization, absolutely, people ask me, why is it about race? It's always been about race, but unfortunately, there's one thing that history teaches us is that we don't learn from history. And that's because information isn't readily available. I think the biggest problem right now is disinformation and misinformation. I can tell you why I became involved was I got tired of seeing so much, misinformation, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. And when I did get involved, I always found that there wasn't enough volunteer work being done I should rephrase that. There wasn't enough outreach. If I wasn't introduced to a specific group through 6 degrees of separation, I had no idea that group existed. And I think that's the biggest problem, especially when you consider that Florida is the Sunshine State. We have too many distractions. So we need to address the fact that we are not disseminating information properly. And whatever it is that we're doing, everyone is stuck in their echo chambers. We need to get away from our echo chambers, get away from our groups, and increase our outreach so that we do disseminate the proper information and educate people. That, for me, is where we need to start. We need to start doing a better job of that.
Thank you, Carlos. Any other thoughts from panelists on the question about Black and Brown solidarity or coalition? Well, as we think about institutions in Florida, and several of you already raised the notion that about organizations, institutions, the stresses that COVID-19 has placed on them, the stresses of polarization, misinformation. One of the things that struck me when my wife and I first moved to Florida in 2008 was the constant attacks on public education that are waged from Tallahassee and different parts. And so it became a normal kind of thing to see, like the first day that when the legislature would open its session was a long-winded diatribe against teachers, against schools. And it's one of the real things that distinguishes the state, unfortunately. I'm not saying that attacks on public education are not national, they are, but they're here in Florida, they're kind of ramped up in certain ways. Given that's the case, in what ways have these attacks been impacting low-income minority youth in Florida? And what plans and stances do current 2022 candidates have to combat the DeSantis administration's recent actions, such as continuing to funnel funding for public schools into private school vouchers for families, and et cetera? I know that was a long question.
I'll go ahead and jump on that. I only have a public education. I made it as far as high school. And there isn't a day that goes by that I am not grateful for the profound effect my teachers have had. And I think it's a real problem that we continue to denigrate our teachers. Everybody talks about getting back to the basics. The basics is that it's an education. So we need to do everything possible. And when I say we, I think we need to stress that it's we. We need to take a good look in the mirror and, address why it is that we're attacking the one institution that is supposed to foster, our future. So we all need to do our part. We definitely need to challenge. I, for one, would like to see a lot more work from the teachers union. I believe in the power of collective. I believe in the power of people. And I must admit that I'm a bit disappointed the unions haven't organized better against these attacks, because in my opinion, that's what they're there for. So I'd like to see more action from the teachers themselves also, stand up, organize, John Lewis said, fight the good fight. And this is a good fight because education is an integral foundation for our future.
Thank you, Carlos. Other thoughts on attacks on public education, the impact on our youth? Well, I have a lot of questions.
I mean, no. I mean, there's so much we could say. I mean, we're coming out of a legislative session where, the governor did everything he could to make sure we were taking Black out of Black history and attacking LGBTQ kids and families. It's ground zero it's like Florida governor and Texas governor trying to outdo each other. And I think that really, what folks sometimes don't realize is while Florida swings in presidential elections, our state legislature has been controlled by the right for almost 2 decades, right? And people don't see all the gains that we've been making at the local level, flipping county commissions. We now have the first woman and the first Jewish mayor in Miami-Dade County, our largest county in the state, that, as Sandra said, is a majority minority. Excellent teachers unions there and United Teachers of Dade, and under the leadership of Carla Max Hernandez, who I think is one of the first Latino presidents of a teachers union and an officer of national in the national union. You see school boards that were really fighting for public health and going against the DeSantis administration really clearly, to the point where the DeSantis administration was trying to take their money away. But I think it's important, given the role that the state legislature plays in limiting curriculum. Again, that's where the importance of organizations and outside institutions comes in. Like, what does it look like for us to create civic education? I know we have a team that does, we call it School of Unity and Power in English and Spanish and Creole, or a Path to Power training with many of our partners in the state. That's really, helping people understand the history of voter suppression. I think we cite some of your scholarship, Dr. Ortiz. I think it's important for us to understand that education doesn't just happen in the school system. And while we have to fight for our public schools tooth and nail, we also have to create and celebrate and support other institutions that are helping develop our civic consciousness.
Thank you. Other thoughts, panelists, before we turn to the next question? Well, the next question kind of builds on what Andrea was just saying. Florida has faced 2 decades of Republican dominance in elections. It's easy. And, a lot of colleagues across the country don't know this because, as you mentioned earlier, Florida is seen as a swing state. But within the state, the Republicans have pretty much run Tallahassee largely, especially over the past 2 decades. So how is this election shaping up to be different? And how is Florida's political landscape signaling a change? And I think this is important, especially for our students, because they see the 2 decades of GOP dominance as being part of the reason that they can't be bothered. They're like, well, if the Republicans are going to run everything, we're just not going to bother to vote. But what I hear from you all emerging is a sense that there is a change on the horizon, or am I misreading that?
I love that question, Dr. Ortiz. I think it's an important question, and I think it's a question for our future generations. I've been working with diaspora communities in Florida for 20 years, and I'm 42 now. I remember being 22 and going to different organizations and asking them, hey, why aren't we doing some more with Latinos? We could be doing this. We could be reaching out to Colombians. We should be reaching out to Mexicans. And at the age of 22, and the constant response was, we don't have any money for that. We don't have any funds for that. To the point now, I say is, no, it's not that you don't have funds for that. It's the fact that it's not a priority for you. And I think it's the moment where we have to speak out and say, enough is enough. We need to invest in our communities, but also we can't continue to whine if an organization does or does not do. We just have to go out there and do what needs to be done. We are in the brink of losing our democracy. We have a major threat to our democracy in this nation. And not only here, but this is happening globally. And so What we need to do now is work together, just make sure our voices are heard. But most important, I think this is a message for the nation that Florida is an important state. Why? Because Governor DeSantis, if he continues and he becomes president one day and we do not stop him, we better be careful of what's going to happen in this nation. So this is why Florida is so important. This is why we need to invest in Florida. This is why Florida should not be taken for granted. So I think that this is a message for all of us, no matter if it's knocking on your neighbor's door, but we all can do something to make a difference, to be of an influence in this election, so we can have the democratic values that we have so much strive for in this great nation.
Thank you, Ellen. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it goes back to my statement, about organizing and information. Everybody talks about it takes a village. I remember growing up in the 80s where it really did take a village, where your neighbors, everyone knew each other, everybody was involved one way or another. You'll walk into neighborhoods now where, yeah, I've lived there for 20, 30 years, but I don't talk to my neighbor. And I think that's the underlying problem with society. The village has become fragmented, compartmentalized. Everyone lives in their own echo chamber, not worried about anything because, no news is good news. And it's for me, it's do or die now, man, which is why I decided to get involved. And it's not enough. I'm not doing enough, and I know more needs to be done, which is why I've always said that the self-reflection, it's time for everyone to, take a little self-reflection and worry about our future, because we're at a pivotal point.
I just add to that, I think it's important for folks to remember that it wasn't that long ago that the only Spanish-speaking electeds in Florida in the state legislature were Republican. And that has been changing. I mean, we now have the first Latina running for to be the Democratic nominee for governor in the state, Senator Andrea. We have queer Latinas running to be the first LGBTQ Latinas in the state Senate, Paul Ortiz and Janelle Perez. So we're seeing incredible fighters for working class families going out there and energizing Latino voters. And then, I think it's again, people who are getting involved in organizations because they want to see Florida para todos. They want to be a part of change and building a new majority coalition where a Florida where all of our kids and our grandkids can thrive. So, I know that's why we're working to register at least 100,000 new voters in the state by the midterm elections. It's why this week we're in Tallahassee to challenge the governor's dismantling of Black districts. It's why on May Day, we're working with organizations like the Miami Workers Center to turn out people across the state to push for issues that people care about. And really just want to invite folks, if you're in Florida and you want to get involved, you can text Chisme to 58123 and or look online at floridarising.org.
And I'd like to add to what Andrea is saying, because I think that that's really important. From all the individuals you see in this panel, but also in terms of the many people who for decades have done the good work, who have been out there, who have been showing up, who are leaders in their communities. And that's one thing that gives me hope in terms of all the campaigns that I'm seeing here in the state of Florida. A lot of them are hiring local community leaders, local consultants, instead of, parachuting them down from other places and placing them in Hialeah. And they're like, you don't know our community. You don't know who we are. And I think that when we start doing that, we start placing individuals who are part of the communities, who have the trust of their communities in this arena. It's not rocket science. We can win this, right? Because we can win this because we have the trust of these individuals who say, this is a person you should vote for. And they mean it, and they've never defrauded the person that they're talking to. And that's very important. We have to remember that, because one of the things that I think is vital in this 22 election is that every single community in Florida believes and feels and sees themselves with a chair at the table.
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm sorry, Dr. Paul, if you need to change. Okay. I'll just say that I think for us, a Florida native born and raised, I try to reconcile what I'm seeing in terms of numbers, in terms of, I live in Broward. Broward County is known to be the most progressive county in the state of Florida. I do work in Miami-Dade County. I understand that if we don't turn out in South Florida, there's major repercussions for the state. I also know that communities feel as if people have made promises that, and they're not responding, they're not answering, they're not, following through with what they promised they will do. And so for us at the Miami Workers Center, what we're saying is that we're building block by block, and we want to talk to and work with communities at the issues that are their priorities. And we're doing that. Right now, South Florida has #1 in the nation on tenant issues. Let's see where candidates are. Let's see where our elected officials are on housing issues, because we know that they're going to have to vote, right? They're voting in primaries. They're voting in November. And in Florida, South Florida, there's elections every year, right? We're always voting. And so we want to be clear with our communities. Here are the candidates who are moving things forward. Here are folks who are not. Right. And these are your immediate concerns. Right. And so for us, that's what we want to do. If folks are, concerned about their children in the school system, I say we're talking to people from student government to school board, to local elections, to county, to state, whatever communities are saying their #1 issues are, we're showing them and we're working alongside them to ensure that they can see immediate solutions. Because if all it is talk, if all it is broken promises, if all it is all these promises and nothing ever lands, what can we say to people on the at the doors? I will never forget 2020 knocking doors, and a gentleman in the district that our organization is in said to me, look around, look at this community. We've been complaining about dumping for years. Look, do you think they care about us? And we came back to the organization and said, that won't happen again. The folks, he's going to get a meeting with the folks who are responsible for trash pickup in his community. And if they can't fix it, we have to offer another option. And for me, it's like, I don't want to vote for people who we know don't come from communities. We don't want to vote for folks who just pop into our communities. We want to make sure that we're growing our own people who share our ideology, who understand our values, who will not pick between us or put us against each other. We want to make sure that we feel good and we know really well to our core who our people are. And so I'm excited to see members of the Miami Workers Center get interested in sitting on boards, get interested in running for office. I'm at a C4, but talking to Andrea about what they're doing at Florida Rising, to see what candidates they are endorsing, to see if we can be aligned to ensure that, again, that they're not broken promises. It's not a lifetime of dream deferred for our community, but that they can actually see physically the changes that they want to see.
Thank you, Sandra. And Adolfo reminded me that we're transitioning now into general questions that audience members have posed. And we have some really good questions here. And the first question brings us full circle back to the turnout and getting involved and door-to-door kind of question, specifically about younger people. And so the question is, how can Latino youth get involved in changing their fates in this state? What political roles should they be playing? We'll just kind of throw it out there. I'm the oldest person on the panel, so I can't answer this question.
Any and all. I think we're really lacking there. There's an old adage that says youth is wasted on the young. And I think that is really the point that I try to drive, is that we really need our youth to step up and get involved. And a lot of that comes from some of the volunteer work that is being done, they focus on a specific group and they don't want to reach out, or they don't have the resources on social media to really engage the younger youth. And I think that's a problem that we need to address, is that we need to provide content that's engaging for them, and not just continue to, just hit everybody with an email and ask for money.
Yeah, I'm super inspired by young people. I can't necessarily, I can speak of the young people that we engage on a regular basis. And, we're seeing the TikToks, we're seeing the IG posts with them really breaking down what's happening at the, during legislative session in real terms and the terminology that people use. So I think there are many opportunities and continue to be historically. We know that all of the movements, I'm a student of movements. We know that young people have been at the forefront. I'm a millennial, we're older now. And so I was super excited to see millennials step up. I'm super even more excited about the Zers and watching what they do with their power. And so again, make it fun, make it sexy. I think they can do that. And that's what we want to see. We want it to be engaging. We want it to, we don't want it to be like doom and gloom. We want to see how they can make it creative, how they can make it resonate with us. I saw a young lady on TikTok really break down what's happening with foreign policy as it relates to Ukraine and Russia, and the way that she put the words together, the way that she explained it for years, I was sold, right? And it was a way for me to continue to follow along. So people who don't want to watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox News all day, there are other options for Zers who are into political education to break it down for their peers and for their families.
Well, this is one of my favorite questions because there's so many Latina young women across the state, like just doing incredible work. So a quick shout out to Isa and Jessie and Lily, Ellie, Ana with Florida Student Power Network, and Latinas who are starting podcasts, who are running digital. Check out Latinas en Marcha on Instagram. Latinas at Poder Latinx and Alianza and Unidos. There's I could go on and on because I just see young Latinas like just making a way, like Evelyn spoke about. Like when you see something that's not happening and you believe in it, I'm watching like young women do big things. And so like, let's invest in our sueños, let's we can't wait around. And I think if each of us put our granito de arena, we can make big things happen. And I've seen that. I think that's been one of my greatest joys in almost 2 decades of organizing, is watching just like ordinary people come together and accomplish extraordinary things. So I just also thinking about the people who organize young people, Liz Marie, so many people who have that calling, Lupita. So feel free to reach out. Always happy to support Latinas here in Florida who are making moves and trying to build the future that we need.
I want to just add one thing, because I think Andrea hit it right on the spot. And, to the youth that's watching this right now, we need you. We need you. We need you. We need your creativity. We need you to share those stories that are happening at home in a way that people can understand why we're doing what we're doing. But I just remembered something that my friend Rosie Gonzalez Spears, who's a Democratic strategist, said recently. She said, "Look, remember that all of us here, even in this that you see here as panelists, like someone helped us. Someone was a mentor to us, and you all are thinking about that mentor right now in this panel, I'm sure. And so don't ever be afraid, in the words of Rosie, don't ever be afraid to contact individuals that you think, that are doing this or that. Most of us are, or all of us are always willing to help people who have that hunger inside. So don't be afraid to reach out to us, and we'll see how we can help you out."
Excellent. Well, Evelyn, this is a question that you shared with us earlier, your thoughts. And it has to do with increased transparency. The question is, do you feel that having increased transparency will also help combat the spread of disinformation and inaccurate political information? And to what extent do you think institutions will be able to execute that transparency?
Well, I think that transparency is always key. Transparency is part of, I don't know, there's a building here in Pembroke Pines that was built by Mario Cartaya, a Cuban architect. And one of the things he did for the city commission is he made these, clear windows all across the building because it represented transparency. So yes, it's important, but besides transparency, what we need to also make sure that we know is that we're giving and we're ensuring that we're giving accurate information. That's the most important piece, that everything we say is based on something that's based on truth, and it's based on making sure that people know that we're not liars, but we're giving information from the heart, because that's what any community deserves. So I think that that's the most important piece in terms of our work. Don't start playing these games that we're seeing other people playing of just, doing this because it's, clickbait, or it's going to make the person go to this. We need to speak from facts and truth always, and expose those who are not doing it. That's what we can do when we are fighting with people who have no gloves. All we can do, as when my father-in-law once told me, is expose them for lying.
Excellent. Well, we've been given, because of the quality of the panel and the amazing questions, we've been given a little bit of an extension by Adolfo, just a few minutes over. If it's okay with everyone, I know you all have very busy schedules. I'm getting questions. People are texting me questions. So this conversation is raising a lot of really excellent thought. So the next question I see here is, how can we better educate our community members about structural issues such as systemic racism and heteropatriarchy when Florida's government continues to attack these kinds of conversations? What should activism and community organizing look like in 2022 before our midterm elections?
This is a build off of the last question as well. Everyone would, we would believe everyone thinks their information is factual. Everyone, depending on what side of the aisle you are, whatever the information is, people are like, this is it, I'm telling the truth. What we know interrupts that is relationships. It's like when we're in deep relationship with one another, when we teach folks how to find trusted sources. What are trusted sources? What does it mean to be able to find the source of where you got this information? And so for me, it's that to Andrea's earlier point around a political home, like where can you always go to find information and to talk things through? And how do you ask questions to the aunties and to the grandmas who are sending you things on WhatsApp all night long? And you're like, Grandma, where did you get that from? Like, tell me, who sent it to you? Do you think they're factual? That they could send you something factual about this. And one of the things I name all the time is we have this conversation at the Miami Worker Center when I'm saying, I can never be your pastor. That's not what I do, right? I can't also give you medical advice, but we can be in relationship together. And I'm going to trust the folks who I know dedicate their lives to this, who are into movements, who've studied movements, to really be in relationship with us, to help us struggle through these issues together. And where I see that struggle, and I'll be quiet, in Florida, is that, we have a legislature that is, voting on all types of crazy things. And then we pass minimum wage for $15 an hour. And then all the legislature is so bad. And then the voters vote and say, yeah, returning citizens get the right to vote. And so there needs to be more struggle, right? Because we think and we know that we can get there, right? That we actually do believe, right? But we need to be in struggle, and we need to talk to one another on the hard things and not back away from that. And I'll shut up.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Sandra. And for now, that will be our last word for this session. But I suspect we will be getting back together again at some point. And at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to my dear colleague, Adolfo Romero.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for a fruitful and dynamic discussion. You're all a great inspiration to all of us. The power of local organizing and working in solidarity with each other. That's an answer that I just got from all this, which is very powerful. We can all agree that the fight for equality does not end in this webinar, but at the ballot box. I would like to encourage all of you to follow us on our social media to see what we're each doing OPPI and SPOP for Latinos and communities of color. So follow us. The links should be posted on the side chat bar. And yeah, thank you everyone for your participation today. It's been an honor to have you all here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Adolfo. Thanks, everyone.